Welcome to a fireside chat with Samir Narula of AugustOne and Valentin Bula of Cofounder. I'm your host Nicholas Stevenson of AugustOne, and today we're going to talk about the future of work. We'll discuss the ins and outs of the workplace and how it has changed with the global pandemic. The purpose of this podcast is to bring in experienced professionals in the covered sector to give you a view on the reality they are facing and how to overcome and adapt to change. Samir, if you could please introduce yourself.
Hi, Nicholas. Thanks for having me on. And I'm actually really excited to speak with Valentin because Valentin and I started working remotely together across continents almost exactly a year ago. And given the business, the line of business that Valentin decided to go into, I'm quite excited to learn more about how the world has evolved with people working from home. I'm, as you know, the managing partner of AugustOne and in Singapore, and our interest is primarily in helping individuals, families, and companies live up to their potential. We do that by investing in venture. We do that by investing in companies that are going through a succession triggered event or being spun out of large organizations. And we work with governments, corporates, universities, and families to help these companies then grow and access new markets through digitalization, through partnerships, and also by making their processes and systems more sustainable. So thanks for having me on.
Thank you, Samir. Valentin, could you please have a brief introduction of yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Nikolai, and good to be with you on this call, Samir, as well. I think we even started working remotely when I was an intern, but you might have forgotten about this when you were in the US. Definitely excited to talk about this topic as it's now a core to what I'm doing. So I used to work previously at AugustOne, and we started working across the globe in the first lockdown, let's call it, beginning of the pandemic. And now I'm currently co-founder of a company called Software, where we promote the use of underused space and potentially also for work and for people working remotely, and have a few other projects that are linked to people and companies that want to work from abroad and looking for new kind of ways to gather their employees together and connect with people.
Thank you, Valentin. The pandemic accelerated existing trends in remote work, e-commerce, and automation, with up to 25% more workers than previously estimated potentially needing to switch occupations, according to McKinsey Global Institute. Work from home has now become part of our lives. Samir, as you're working closely with SMEs, founders, and government agencies, could you highlight the main disruptors you have faced in maintaining virtual relationships?
Yeah, no, thanks, Nicholas. I think maybe Valentin will have some points on this as well. We were, as a team, quite digitally savvy to begin with. So, and in fact, it's interesting because when Valentin was with the team, he had led the efforts to build a program that we internally called Einstein, which was effectively a platform for us to manage data, manage information, manage workflow, and manage communication digitally. And the idea for us was always to be able to work and live wherever we are, work from wherever we are, and collaborate with people around the world. And as a small team, we've always had to do this since we work with folks in Europe, we work with folks in India, we have partners in different parts of the world. So we always needed to work in a way which was efficient from a geographic perspective. And to be totally honest with you, also it was a consideration of costs. So for us to be able to have everyone fly in every time to do a meeting or sharing information in a physical format was not always practical. So, and I think Valentin's the right person to answer this, but basically the project was to evaluate what are the different tools and technologies available for us and how do we make ourselves flexible enough where we can share information, communicate, and collaborate digitally. So that helped us when the lockdown, as you call it in Europe, and circuit breaker, as we call it in Singapore, started. And our government here in Singapore has also been very digital from the beginning. So that really helped us. We had also started quite a robust program to do web-based events. And again, Valentin can answer this because he ran the Port Excel program at the time when it became fully digital. And now it's the PXL program. So that had already set us up in terms of external communication. So internal and stakeholder communication was on Einstein. And then third-party external communication started happening through web events. So we took to it like fish, as fish to water, to be honest with you. But
Yep.
the challenges we faced were more with some of the folks who are very, very used to making new relationships in person, which I think will continue to be a challenge, where existing relationships can be reinforced and can be maintained digitally. But when a new relationship has to be made, especially with cultures that are much more tactile, or with individuals who are of a different generation, it becomes a bit tougher. But I'd really be curious to also get Valentin's inputs on this.
Oh, absolutely. Samir was spot on. The main thing here is, I guess, we were ready somehow, because we had planned it for different reasons. We were looking to, be as efficient as possible in our approach to work, and with all digital tools available, we had thought that this was, a good way to move forward, to make sure that we're not wasting time crossing the city or taking the next airplane, and being able to connect with anyone around the world at any time, and also us be a decentralized team and still have access to the same information, be able to communicate clearly what we want. I think this effort, while we're making that happen inside internally, we're already communicating with external partners, stakeholders, be it the government, be it the startups, because we were exchanging on them, helping them create that internally as well. And I think through that effort, when actually the COVID happened and we were forced to move to digital communication, people just realized, okay, this is the value, we're ready, we have this, and now it's more about getting used to it. And I think what you also mentioned with initially everyone wanted to jump on calls all the time because they were craving this social interaction. With time, it passed by, and people are also getting used to meeting new people digitally completely. And although it's still not the same, people are more and more open to it. And I think that was the first step towards making this stay in the future. Now, I'd say especially with Singapore, I think most of the people were ready and they already had the experience of, or at least the tools to move towards a digital world or digital only world. Whereas in some other parts of the world, it took a bit more time. And we're lucky to evolve in an environment where we're surrounded with people who are quite agile and aware of the different tools, which facilitated all of this transition, which might not be the case in different sectors.
Thank you very much, Valentin. Could you tell us a bit more about the Offsite platform and how the new work patterns are benefiting you guys, but also challenges you're seeing with the business?
Absolutely. So what started as initially, so Offsite is, as I mentioned earlier, it's a platform for short-term rental of space and specifically underused space. Very, very, very much focused on the workspace, where you could rent, in our idea, you could rent any space from a co-working desk to a meeting room in a hotel from 1 hour to a day. Now we pivoted a little bit, but the interesting thing is actually people, and especially space owners, want to create a social atmosphere. They don't want people who just drop in and get out. I think that was one of the biggest learnings we got, that the actual managers of these spaces, they don't want these kind of people. Although it might bring them more revenue, or potential new revenue, they really privilege people or prefer people who come in every or 3 times a week or every day, and that are part of a social community because they value that kind of exchange of knowledge, the spillover effect we mentioned as well, and interculturality of a specific space. What we're now looking into is more punctual spaces or rental. It's more of a, let's say, a team that wants to do a one-day offsite. They want to have a meeting and work on a specific topic or brainstorm, and they're looking for unique, one-of-a-kind space to exchange ideas. They want to be in a unique setting, let's say a shed in the wood or a house in the trees, and that's what we're kind of working towards now, kind of providing you this space where you can gather with your team and do a one-day work session, half a day, one-day work session, be it with other activities or just simply focused on a classical, let's say more classical meeting. And yeah, we're quite surprised to see that. Now it's still too early to attract many corporates, which was something we also thought That would be our main customer base, where we're looking even at putting together a credit system, membership system, where companies would actually pay for their employees to access spaces closer to their homes. So they'd be interested in a platform where we have spaces, be it in a small village in Switzerland to city center of Paris, right? And actually corporates are not ready for that. One, because they have, first of all, they have to see the value, where now they haven't really gotten rid of their office, which is their biggest cost. And they're transitioning towards it, but they have 3, 5, or 10-year leases, which they're still going through, and they have to plan on what's going to be next and see if it's really valuable to continue working in a fully remote hybrid model, or fully back to the office. We've seen some banks wanting everyone to come back to the office, but I think it's starting, and I think we're maybe in that space a bit too early. But we learned a lot that people still want this social interaction, but it's going to be more, and still want to work from let's say work from home or remotely, but it's going to be more punctual, and it's going to be more like, okay, once a week, twice a month, and that's something we didn't really expect. We thought people initially, I think it was everyone's kind of will to be, okay, I want to work remotely at 4 or 5 days a week. But people get into what we just talked, right? They kind of lose productivity to a certain extent after a while, and maybe we've been in this period quite a long time, but they crave social interaction. They feel they're forgotten, maybe for promotions, for exchanges. They don't feel like everyone's on the same level. Sometimes they don't have the adequate workspace at home or near where they live. And I think all of this creates this kind of disadvantages that they don't want to see going forward.
For sure. I believe that smaller companies and entrepreneurial teams will adapt quicker because it actually benefits them versus larger corporates, where they have sunk cost and they've got traditional biases.
But I mean, a good example is you at AugustOne, right? You went fully remote, no office space anymore, correct? But you still meet once in a while, or at least from what you said, weekly, because it gives them certain energy, and pushes people to say, okay, I'm part of something. I'm not just isolated on my side, and that's typically the companies we are, or the type of groups. Might not be just a company, but it might be like a team in a large corporate that has this mindset that say we want to work independently. We trust each other. We know what we have to do, and we're accountable. But then once in a while, let's get together, let's exchange, let's have this both social and professional interaction. And I think that's the future of work. It's going to that direction where teams are going to accept that, okay, my team is working half remotely or hybrid, and then once in a while we have to work together, be it at the office, if there's still an office, or somewhere else, and hopefully they book it through offsite. But that's kind of the idea, and how it's going forward, and what we've seen in discussions with people.
What's interesting is because Singapore is coming out of the worst peak. I mean, frankly, things are opening up. One of the things that's happened is actually office space. 2/3 of office spaces that can be used is being used. People are going back. And the other thing that's happened is, like, from our perspective, we have office space at 1880 now, or we have space there where we meet. And we've also realized that with new people joining, one needs to be a bit more, you need to have some more social interaction. So, but having said that, in Bangalore, we now have 2 people, and we're going to add more people there who we have never met physically. They've just been digital with us. And it's worked out really well. So I think some of it has to do with the type of role, but it also has to do with the person. Now, one of the other things you mentioned is interesting, where not everyone has that dedicated office space at home to be able to work, or they have families and kids and so on and so forth. And this will then also create a situation, I wonder, similar to how in the US, people who didn't have cars could not take jobs in certain locations. So if you don't have adequate working space at home, or quiet working space, or internet connections, and we're in developed countries, but if you think about developing countries where a lot of the job growth is happening, places like Manila, where people always work from home because they don't want to commute for 2-3 hours to the city center. or places like Bangalore where people did have to go to work because they live in smaller homes and you can't really work from home, or places like Tokyo and Paris. I wonder if a new geographic divide will come in depending on where can you work from home and where can you not work from home. What were your experiences in Spain and Portugal and Germany? Like, do you see
Mm.
this? I guess they're all
Yeah.
developed countries, but still there are differences among
Yeah.
them.
For sure. There's one point that I want to come back on, and you mentioned that the the redistribution of talents is going to be quite important. But the thing is, also companies have access to and I feel comfortable hiring from anywhere in the world. So now, as a let's say a German or American, you're competing with anyone across the globe. So I think this is going to push also like how talents have to upgrade their skills and just be better, because you're not just competing with your surrounding, you're constantly competing with everyone across the world. Although there are like some precautions that have to be taken. From my experience, so I did some off-site trips. So I went to Portugal for about 6 weeks, I believe, with a group of people that we kind of knew each other, and we decided to rent a house together and work from there. Same thing in Mallorca in Spain. So this time with people from a different group, where I didn't know anyone except one person, and we also came together to work. The idea is really to get that social interaction, bring some new energy, motivate each other to work and be accountable, but in a different setting. And mainly like there's a social underlying under that, where you meet new people, which you would potentially have met like at an after work drink or my experience from Portugal, mixed experience in terms of, let's say, productivity or capability to be efficient or to work in a productive manner. I think it was also like still kind of the early days of being able to work from wherever we wanted. A lot of people actually went with us on the trip and did not mention it to their employers. There was still a stigma. Okay, are we actually allowed to do this? And I'm afraid they're going to say no. But if I just go and don't say anything, they won't say anything. That's something that now feels a lot more normal. So I just went. That was actually 2 days ago in Spain, and the group I was with, like everyone told their bosses, and they were perfectly fine with saying, "Look, I'm abroad. I'm going abroad. I'm leaving for 2 weeks. I have internet. I have everything I need. If I'm really not productive, then let me know." But and I believe I can be. And we actually were way more than I expected. Very much, spending putting the hours in, getting things done, and also pushing each other. I think that was quite interesting in that trip. Where we're more connected. We're kind of all from the same environment: startups, VC, entrepreneurship, or looking into getting into an entrepreneurship. Whereas Portugal was more of a work holiday where people were kind of, okay, I have to do things, but it's not that important. And they also came from different settings. So they're working more into corporate settings, environments, larger enterprises, where they had fixed hours, let's say 9 to 6, but then after that, outside of that, they're completely free to do whatever they want, have the weekends. If they take a day off, they have the day completely off. So it kind of was a different dynamic versus Spain, where everyone was very flexible with their time. But then after dinner, maybe if 3-4 of us would go back to the laptop and spend another hour or 2 hours working, because during the day we spend 2 hours in the sun going for a ride or having a nice dinner and taking time through the dinner, cooking or whatever.
Right. Thank you, Valentin and Samir. Thank you for your time and valuable insights. My kindest regards to you, and all the best in the future development of Zofsite.